Good evening. Before we begin tonight's hearing of the Public Utilities Committee of Columbus City Council, just want to thank everyone for their preparation for tonight's hearing. From the Department of Public Utilities, we have Deputy Director of Sustainability and Regulatory Compliance, Elena Shockey, and Assistant Administrator for the Division of Power, Kristen Fenner. Thank you very much for representing the department this evening. I also want to thank my colleagues in council, the staff, CTV, and members of the public for taking time to be here in chambers this evening, and those who are tuning in virtually tonight. Mark, let me know when we're ready. We are here to... Good evening, everyone. Okay, we are getting some feedback in City Hall. Tonight, I want to thank everyone for their work and the preparation for today's hearing.
We are going to see if we can fix that.
Director John Lee, thank you for representing the department this evening. And from the Department of Building and Zoning Services, we have Director Scott Messer and Fiscal Officer Eric Voorhees. Thank you both for joining us here tonight. I also want to thank council staff, Kevin McCain from my staff, and Andy McDonald. Okay, well, that was an outtake from a prior public utilities hearing, so we do not have John Lee. As I was saying, we have several folks in the Department of Public Utilities here with us tonight to talk about several changes to regulatory updates to the Public Utilities Regulatory Policies Act of 1978. This hearing is available to stream on CTV, Council's Facebook page, and YouTube pages. The hearing will also be posted on Council's YouTube channel following the hearing. The Federal Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act of 1978, otherwise known as PURPA, was recently amended by the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021, otherwise known as the IIJA. The amendments required non-regulated electric utilities to consider implementing standards that encourage conservation of energy, efficient use of green energy facilities and resources, and equitable rates for electrical customers. The Division of Power of the City of Columbus, Department of Public Utilities, is subject to the requirement as a non-regulated electric facility with a total annual retail sales of over 500 million kilowatt hours. Thus, the City of Columbus Department of Public Utilities must consider these new purpose standards. The first standard is number 20, related to demand and response and demand flexibility. And the second is number 21, related to electric vehicle charging programs. The City of Columbus City Council initiated the process to consider these two standards in response to a request from the Department of Public Utilities. Notice of this public hearing was published in the City Bulletin on November 12th, 2022, and again on January 7th, 14th, and 14th of 2023. The notice invited all interested parties, residents, to provide public testimony on the subject by submitting written testimony to my office. We did not receive any written submissions prior to the hearing, nor did we receive any public speaker slips for this hearing either. There are representatives here from the Department of Public Utilities to testify on behalf of the utilities' consideration of these standards. So first, we will hear from Kristen Fenner, Assistant Administrator of the Division of Power at the City of Columbus Department of Public Utilities. Ms. Fenner, the floor is yours.
Okay. Technical difficulty. Councilmember Dorans, members of the Public Utilities Committee, I am Kristen Fenner, Assistant Administrator of the Division of Power at the City of Columbus Department of Public Utilities. I am testifying on behalf of the Division of Power in response to the amendments to the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act of 1978, referred to as PURPA. This was made in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. The Department of Public Utilities has three divisions: the Division of Water, Division of Sewers and Drains, and the Division of Power, which I'll refer to as Columbus Power. Columbus Power is a full-service, publicly owned electric utility that provides power to more than 17,000 industrial, commercial, and residential customers through our own distribution system. Our retail electric sales generate more than 900 million kilowatt hours a year, and as a nonprofit municipal utility, our proceeds from the sale of energy goes to fund the city's streetlights. Columbus Power is committed to providing reliable, low-cost energy services to our customers. As a non-regulated electric utility with an annual retail electric sales greater than 500 million kilowatt hours, Columbus Power and the Department of Public Utilities were tasked with considering the adoption of two new PURPA standards. The first standard is related to demand response and demand flexibility. The language from PURPA describing demand response and demand flexibility standards reads as follows. Subparagraph A, general. Each electric utility shall promote the use of demand response and demand flexibility practices by commercial, residential, industrial consumers to reduce electric consumption during periods of unusually high demand. The latter, demand flexibility, connotes such concepts as increasingly sophisticated time of use, grid interactive buildings, controls on water systems. Subparagraph B, rate recovery. In general, each state regulatory authority shall consider establishing rate mechanisms allowing an electric utility with respect to which the state regulatory authority has rate-making authority to timely recover cost of promoting demand response and demand flexibility practices in accordance with subparagraph A. Non-regulated electric utilities. A non-regulated electric utility may establish rate mechanisms to timely recover the cost of promoting demand response and demand flexibility practices in accordance with subparagraph A. In consideration of this standard, the Columbus Power and Department of Public Utilities recommends that we adopt the PURPA standard regarding demand response. Columbus Power has an existing demand response program. The city originally enacted legislation in 2009 to aggregate demand response of retail customers. Since 2011, Columbus Power has contracted with the curtailment service providers. The current contract is with NRG through May 31st, 2023. In adoption of the PURPA demand response, Columbus Power plans to promote the existing opportunities to our customers to encourage additional participation in demand response program established with NRG. Councilmember Dorans, members of the Public Utilities Committee, I appreciate your attention and consideration in this matter.
Thank you very much. We will next hear from Deputy Director of Sustainability and Regulatory Compliance, Elena Shockey. Ms. Shockey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Dorans. I am testifying on behalf of the Department of Public Utilities in response to the amendments to the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act of 1978, referred to as PURPA, made in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. The Department of Public Utilities, as you heard from Ms. Finner, houses the Division of Power. It also houses the city's sustainability program, Sustainable Columbus. The city is committed to a 45% reduction in emissions by 2030 and to meet its goal of carbon neutrality by 2050, as pledged in the Columbus Climate Action Plan. Columbus Power is a full participant in the plan and is charged with evaluating and implementing projects in the plan. The language from PURPA that I'm here to present on today describes the electric vehicle charging standard and reads as follows. Each state shall consider measures to promote greater electrification of the transportation sector, including the establishment of rates that A, promote affordable and equitable electric vehicle charging options for residential, commercial, and public electric vehicle charging infrastructure. B, improve the customer experience associated with electric vehicle charging, including by reducing charging times for light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles. C, accelerate third-party investment in electric vehicle charging for light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles. And D, appropriately recover the marginal cost of delivering electricity to electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. In consideration of this standard, Columbus Power and the Department of Public Utilities recommends that the City of Columbus Department of Public Utilities adopt the PURPA standard regarding electric vehicle charging rates to further consider measures to promote greater electrification in the transportation sector. Columbus Power has already considered the efficacy of an electric vehicle charging rate for its customers. In 2017, Columbus Power hired a contractor to analyze setting an electric vehicle charging rate as part of a cost of service analysis. At that time, the consultant recommended against adopting the rate to allow further development of data related to energy usage and demands specific to electric vehicle charging sources. To date, Columbus Power has not implemented a specific electric vehicle charging rate. In adoption of the PURPA electric vehicle charging rate standard, Columbus Power plans to issue a request for proposals to reevaluate the efficacy of an electric vehicle charging rate through its current cost of service evaluation. The cost of service evaluation is a study that will determine the cost to provide power to each segment of Columbus Power's customers, including electric vehicle charging stations. The main considerations for electric vehicle charging station rate design are: 1, providing a rate that's structured such that the station is economical for electric vehicle owners to use, and 2, a rate that adequately recovers the cost incurred by the system to provide electric service at the station. Typically, a cost of service study takes a year to complete. Therefore, we anticipate recommendations on the electric vehicle charging rates to be complete in the first quarter of 2024. Although the PURPA requirements apply only to non-regulated utilities, it is worth noting here the strides that the city has made in promoting the greater electrification of the transportation sector through its sustainability work. The city recently adopted the EV Ready Parking Ordinance, which was passed after public notice, comment, and hearing. The implementation of the ordinance will begin in 2024. Additionally, as part of the city's climate action plan, the city is committed to having a zero-emissions vehicle fleet by 2030. To support this goal, the city intends to develop an equitable electric vehicle charging plan by 2025. Councilmember Dorans, I appreciate your attention and consideration of this matter.
Thank you, Deputy Director. I want to thank you both for your testimony this evening. I know I mentioned earlier we don't have any public testimony or comments that have been submitted, so I wanted to ask just a couple of general questions with these. I was trying to put myself in the shoes of a member of the public and see if we can maybe answer some questions that folks might have if they review this hearing later on. Just in general, we're talking about adopting two different standards, again, because of the passage of the infrastructure law. What would be the consequences if we did nothing? So, we sort of have these requirements that are coming down. What if we just sat in our hands and didn't take any action at this point? What would be the consequences for the city?
So under PURPA, the city could certainly choose not to adopt these standards. In doing that, we would be saying that we don't want to consider further action in these areas. As a leader in climate action, and with the Department of Power being a full participant in our climate action plan, we really want to be on the forefront of clean energy policy, and that's why we've chosen to take further action and continue to consider these standards for our community.
Thank you. Another question, we have a lot going on within sustainability work at the City of Columbus. So when we're talking about our overall sustainability plan, whether or not we're talking about getting to net zero emissions for the city. Deputy Director, you were talking about the EV charging plan that was adopted by the city and passed by council. You were talking about the cost of service study probably taking about a year. How does that sort of fit into the timing of the effectiveness of the EV charging plan? Because that has an implementation period as well. I'm just sort of curious how these two things work alongside one another as we're moving towards implementation of that plan.
Yeah, that's a great question. Our hope is that by timing things the way that we have, that they can be complementary. So at the same time that in 2024, folks are required to start designing, because that's really the requirement for the EV Ready ordinance, is that's the initiation where we're starting to require folks to design EV Ready buildings. We will also have a rate that we expect for EV charging. And so those two things kind of go hand in hand. And so they should kind of be very complementary and come online right at the right time where what the charge is, as well as now we're designing buildings to have that EV readiness.
Thank you. we're certainly not the only city across the country that has our own utility, certainly not the only city-owned utility across the country that are sort of thinking through these standards about how to adopt them. Obviously the department, I would imagine, is thinking through sort of best practices when we think through this. Just in general, I don't know if anyone from the department has sort of thought process around what other cities are doing and sort of how we want to sort of implement this the same, better, different here in Columbus.
Yeah, that is an excellent question, and it's one that we will evaluate much more closely during the cost of service study. In 2017, when we looked at this, the EV charging rates were still very much in their infancy because the EV sector was still very young. And so at that point, there was a landscape analysis that was done. We looked at our American Municipal Power partners as well to kind of really understand things. And so we expect that the cost of service study is going to give us a much better sense of what the landscape of EV rate charging is and what the best practices are there. It's critical to really make sure there's a great balance between the rate being affordable so that people will actually pay it, while the Division of Power still is able to recover what they need to be able to support the charging.
Thank you. I think this question is probably for Ms. Fenner. So many people in Columbus this past summer experienced brownouts, right? But that was not City of Columbus customers. Those were customers of American Electric Power. I think one of the things the department was very proud that they were able to continue to offer service to the folks that were serviced by the utility here in Columbus. Just want to think through sort of residents thinking about that when we talk about demand flexibility as it relates to our own utility, whether or not we're able to think through and make sure that we're able to provide service, and what this standard may or may not do that would affect that ability to provide service in the future, given sort of the events that we sort of saw this past year, which again we're not impacted by the city customers, but again I think most folks in our community would think through, look, that was a pretty big event that happened for many folks, and again those that had city power were I think very pleased to not have that impact them. I'm just curious what, if any, impact that this standard may have on that, given we certainly can't predict what lies in the future or anything like that, but I was curious any thoughts you might have on that topic.
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. One of the major issues that I see with demand response or demand flexibility happened this winter when we had a huge winter storm, and we were being called upon by the grid to reduce our loads. And that's something that a lot of our customers, we'll reach out to a lot of our larger customers, specifically the water and the sewer plants, to ask for them to participate in this reduction pretty much on demand as we are getting these calls from the grid. What we can do is continue, as our customers are becoming more knowledgeable of the impacts of their additional load to the grid, hoping that everyone will step up and understand what we're asking for as we're asking them to reduce their loads and provide demand response and demand flexibility options.
So we've already seen some success already, even before sort of adopting any future standard, that being able to work with, again, some of the larger consumers of our power, of putting these kind of sort of safeguards in place to make sure that again we don't have rolling brownouts or blackouts for folks. It sounds like that has already been sort of proven here in very recent history, that is something that can be done and can be done effectively to make sure that folks continue to have reliable service.
Absolutely. We've had great partnerships, specifically, like I said, with the water and sewer plants. They're some of our largest customers. We've got great relationships with a lot of our other larger customers on our system. They're always willing to step up, and it's better to be able to reduce your load than to have to suffer through brownouts.
Sure. As someone who suffered through one of those, I think people are very appreciative when folks are asked to do something. I think definitely during these last winter storms, I think both, obviously the city and AEP sort of asked people to change their behavior to hopefully help preserve the grid for everyone else. And I was very pleased to see that many customers, many residents did that, and we did not have those consequences like we did in last July. I don't have any other additional questions. I don't know if anyone from the department has anything additionally you'd like to add at this point?
Nothing.
Well, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have any public testimony this evening. So I want to thank everyone from the department for their attendance and testimony here tonight, and certainly answering my questions. As I mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, the next steps in this process are for the City Council to make our findings based on the evidence presented today. Based on those findings, City Council will issue a written final determination, which will be made available to the public. I want to thank members of council staff for preparing for tonight's hearing. John Oswalt from our Legislative Research Office, who covers the Department of Public Utilities Committee, Annie McDonald and Kevin McCain from my staff, as well as Mark Carter and the CTV team. Appreciate all the information tonight, and if anyone in the community is looking for more information on the Public Utility Regulatory Practices Act of 1978, otherwise known as PURPA, which is fun to say, please reach out to me at radorans, that's RADORANS, at columbus.gov, and if we can't answer the question, we'll certainly direct you to folks at the Department of Public Utilities who can. With that, thank you, and this hearing is now adjourned. Have a good evening.